Hello, my name is Julie, and it's time to talk about all the books I read in October. And now I go on and say, oh, my reading month was so weird, and I do it every single month. It doesn't stop. I had an eclectic bunch of books that I read this month, but I feel like that was mostly because of the vlog that I decided to do. I did a video in which I read the least read books on my TBR, but it's also weird because there is a massive book that I'm reading right now that I did not finish October. I'm not even going to finish it in November. I'm hoping to finish it before the end of the year. I have a ton of pages that I read this month that aren't even included in my stats, which I could choose to change that, but I kind of don't care. So let's get into my stats before I talk about the books. So in October, I read only 10 books this month. So that is the second least I have read in a month this year. But that extra book that I'm reading does kind of contribute to that. But as you can see by my pages, I read 4,562 pages this month, which is the number 4 most amount of pages I've read in a month this year. I wasn't reading a lot of books because I was reading really big books. I had an average rating of 3.83, which is pretty on par. I had one book I gave a resounding 5-star, not even a, I don't know if I'm gonna rate it 5-star. This wishy-washy stuff I do literally every month. This is a full 5-star. I had an average page count of these books of 425 pages, which is the second highest it's been all year. And the other month in which I did that, I read Wind and Truth, which is like 1,400 pages. I read an average of 137 pages a day. Again, not counting that book I haven't finished. I read 6 books that I own on audiobook or physically. I added 0 books to my shelf on audio or physically. And I didn't unhaul any. So that means right now, I am at an annual net TBR, audio and physical, of -27. That is incredible. I know I can probably expect to get like 20 books in December, so I think I could be in the net negative for the year. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, I did have a lot of 3 stars this month, but I had some 4s and 5s, and one book I'm not giving a rating. As for genres, I was everywhere, but 50% of the books that I read were sci-fi fantasy. I had 1 speculative, a couple mystery thriller horrors, a classic, and a nonfiction. We really ran the gamut. I read 50% standalones, 2 first books in series, unfortunately, and 3 sequels. Very proud of that. 7 of the books I read were physical, and 3 were audiobooks, and exactly 50% of the books that I read were from authors that were new to me. So the first book that I read this month was The Sapphire Altar by David Dalglish. This is the second book in the Vagrant Gods trilogy, which is about this island called Thanet that is in this world where gods roam the earth. They're these humanoid animal creatures that have a ton of power, and they are local to different regions. I kind of picture them as legendary Pokemon. There is an empire that has gone around conquering everybody, who believes that their god is the only god and has gone around killing these other gods. The island of Thanet is the one that this has happened the most recently to. In the present day, we are having this rebellion force that is trying to get these colonizers off of the island. This is a multi-perspective fantasy, so we are seeing from some people who Thanet is their home. We're seeing from a bunch of people who have come here specifically to fight off the Empire to help the people of Thanet, and we occasionally see from the villains, which I think is a really interesting thing that not a lot of fantasy books do. This is a massively underrated series. I actually recommended the first book in this series in my 10 great books under 10,000 reviews video that I did earlier this year. I knew that this book was going to be lowly read. I did not realize that it would have under 1,000 reviews. I'm so glad that I continued on this series so I can tell people that they should go read it. Now, I will say, I had a bad reading experience with this book, but I do not think the book is bad. So part of my rating is going to be including that I was having a bad mental health time while I was reading this book, but also I spent so long away from the first book. There's little to no recap information given about this book online or printed in the book itself. It does try to do its best to catch you up, and it does have like a 1-page summary, but it really just tells you who the characters are and not what the plot was of the first book. I would recommend to you, if you are going to read this series, to plan on reading it pretty close together. What I really love about this series is how it is talking about colonialism and imperialism head on, specifically how it has to do with religion. And I really like that this book takes the religion towards these gods as the magic and is running with it, and we're learning more mechanics about the magic as it goes on. Like, we're learning a little bit more about how these gods even came to be, and I think that that's really interesting. The island of Thanet is a queer norm place, but the empire empire that is taking them over has outlawed being queer. A lot of the characters that we are following are queer and they are fighting back against this. I specifically liked in this book how it talked about a trans character. I thought that character was really interesting and dynamic, on top of having interesting world building about how the island of Thanet talks about trans people. One of the shining points of this series is that it's using real life rhetoric that is used by Empire to justify itself. All of these arguments against self-governance. I think it's really interesting and I think he's doing a good job. And I also loved the plot twist at the end of this book. Some things I didn't like about this book in particular, I think I struggled to be as connected to the characters as I would have liked to, and I think that partially has to do with, like, I did kind of forget some stuff from the first book. There was another series that I read last month that I spent the same amount of time away from, but I was invested in those characters still. There was a pacing problem in this book. There was a while there where there was nothing happening, but I thought the beginning and the end were good on the plot. So I am excited to figure out what happens in book 3. I would be giving this book a 4 were it not for my reading experience. I think I'm giving it a 3.75. Then again, for that video, I read I Am the Ghost in Your House by Mar Ramasco Moore. This is a YA magical realism, but I think the marketing of this book made you think it's like a horror book. Her main character is Pieta, and she has lived her entire life invisible. She's physically invisible to everyone but her mother, who is also invisible, who was not born invisible. She turned invisible when she was a teenager, and the two of them can see each other. I think there's a lot of really, really fun mechanics about how the invisibility works. But our main character's whole life has been her and her mom running around from different places, stealing to get by, and essentially like living in other people's houses when they can to try to, have shelter. And our main character, when she was younger, they stayed in Pittsburgh for a while, and there was this girl that she had essentially followed around and decided she was in love with this girl. She is going back to this place where this girl is. At the same time that this is happening, her mother starts disappearing. Pi can no longer even see her. So she is trying to make friends for the first time, finally talk to other people to try to figure out what's wrong with her mom and try to have her own life. Really liked the speculative element of this book. It was an amount of rules that I didn't think were going to be there, and it itched my brain the right way. I really enjoyed every once in a while we get vignettes of her life with her mom beforehand. Those scenes were really poignant. And I just really liked the metaphor of invisibility here. I was under the impression going into the book it was going to be about parental control, bordering on abuse, but really it is more in the realm of like Shark Heart by Emily Habak. I think the metaphor is more along the lines of having a parent that you have to take care of, or a parent who is struggling mentally. The thing that I didn't like about this book, it spent too much of the time away from the mother, considering that the main plot line of the book is trying to find the mom. It spent too long hanging out with the other teenagers when we could have built up the emotional stakes of her relationship with her mother, which we do a little bit, and I enjoy those parts a lot. I just wish it was more of the book. I had a very, very good time with this book. It was really easy for me to get through. I was invested in a lot of it, so I'm giving this a 4-star. Then I read Abaddon's Gate by James S. A. Corey. I actually listened to this on audiobook instead of reading the physical copy I own, but now with this book, I have read every single sequel that I owned prior to 2025. The only sequels that I own now are sequels that I have acquired this year. So that is a huge milestone for me. This is the 3rd book in the Expanse series. I actually have the 10th anniversary edition. It's really fun. The Expanse is a space opera series. There's a ton of books, and it is about this ragtag group. They, in the first book, are witnesses of a war crime. They are under threat. People are going to try to take them down, to silence them. And at the same time, this interplanetary war is about to kick off, or might kick off. An alien threat is lurking underneath. In book 3, there is this wormhole that essentially opens up. A bunch of different planets are putting their militaries outside of and kind of waiting to see what happens. And James Holden and his crew are kind of forcibly shoved into that situation. It's a little bit of like a Monsters Are Due on Maple Street situation of people, accusing each other, killing each other, whatever. This is, I believe, the lowest rated book in the series. It is lower rated than the book before it, and books should only go up in reviews. reviews, I definitely do think that this is the worst book in the series so far. This book felt like total filler. Even though I understood that the stakes were high and people were dying, this whole episode did not feel consequential. Yeah, this felt like a Monster of the Week episode of a TV show instead of something that actually built to something. I enjoyed the characters more in books 1 and 2 than I did in here. If this was the first book in the series, I would not have felt strongly about continuing at all, and probably wouldn't have continued to buy these editions of this book that are expensive. But knowing how good the other 2 previous books are in the series, and that the other books in the series have higher ratings than this one, I'm not discouraged from continuing on in the series. I just know that this one is just one that I am going to forget about. So I think I'm rating this one like a 3.5. I just don't care as much as I'd like to. The last book I did read in that vlog was The Stars Undying by Emery Robin. This is the first in a space opera duology called The Empire Without End that is heavily inspired by Cleopatra, Antony, and Caesar. So our main character is Gracia. She is the princess of this planet, and she has been raised by her father to be his heir. However, this planet was founded by a character that's supposed to be like Alexander the Great, who came here, conquered the area, and promptly died. There is this pearl that has a computer program that is trained on the Alexander the Great character that has been passed down through the generations for the ruler to wear at all times to constantly be getting feedback from Alexo the Undying. And at the beginning of this book, our main character's sister is supposedly chosen to be the new ruler instead of her, and a civil war ensues. There is a neighboring empire that was also founded by Alexo. One of the generals that is there, whose name's Caesar, ends up coming to her planet looking for this person who was a mentor of them, Pompey, and the 2 of them form an alliance. Here's the things that I liked about this book. I liked figuring out what the different historical moments in this book were, because I was a dumbass. I did take Latin. I know a good amount about Caesar. I know less about Antony and Cleopatra. I did mix up who everyone was because of what they were named. And also, I was under the impression that the Antony character would be a perspective character in this, so I was just waiting for them to show up, and it turns out they had been there the whole time. But I do anticipate that the Antony character will be a POV character in book 2. I really liked seeing these 3 characters interact with each other. It was like seeing predators like stalk each other in a circle. Like, those conversations that they had just trying to manage those power dynamics were really interesting. However, this book is just over 500 pages and so little plot happens, at least on page. Cleopatra's civil war doesn't take very long. Then there's a lot of time where they're just touring around the planet and basically nothing happens. Then they go to the Rome-like empire, and we basically only see from Cleopatra's point of view, and she is excluded from a lot of things, so a ton of stuff happens off page. For me, this book is for people who are interested in reading a retelling of the history. This is not really for space opera fans, and I think that that is why this book is so lowly rated. It is very slow paced. There is a lot of stuff that happens off page. Like, you have to be invested in the characters who are based on other people for you to really want to get through this book. I had an all right time with this. I definitely did struggle with that pacing problem, but I am really interested to see how the characters of Antony and Cleopatra are going to interact in the second book. So at this moment, I am interested in continuing on in the series. Honestly think it's going to depend on access, like how easily I am able to get the second book. If it was longer than a duology, I wouldn't be as interested in it. But, you know, if I end up waiting long enough that I kind of forget what was going on and everything, I can see myself not continuing on. So I think I'm giving this like a 3.5. I'm not sure. Then I listened to Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. So this is a historical romantic horror. This one is kind of hard to categorize in terms of genre because there are a lot of things that it balances, but as other people have said, I do think that this is more invested in the romance than her other books are. However, I do think that actually really served the story that she was trying to tell. A decade ago, Nena and Nestor had grown up together on Naina's father's ranch. Her father is the ranchero, and Nestor and his family work on the ranch. They grew up as children together. They are close as close could be. Naina and Nestor are out one night together as children. Naina is attacked by a strange creature, and Nestor takes her back to the house. They say that she's dead, and so he runs away because he sees the father's anger and believes that he's going to be killed if he stays. So he runs away for many, many years. But then in 1846, the United States attacks their area and is wanting to take them over. And this is the Mexican-American War. They are going to try defending their area. Turns out that Naina is still alive and somehow survived that attack, that she was dead for a while. And Nestor has been brought back to help fight. And so the two of them are being sent off to war together, as she is a healer and he is going to be fighting, as there is not only the threat of the Americans, but threat of vampires. I love this book so much. This is one of my favorite books of the year. Literally, I listened to this on audiobook and I'm driving in my car and I would just start yelling, I'm obsessed, I'm obsessed, I'm obsessed. I think that these two characters are so well built out. I really liked the dual perspective here. I think that we really get to see all facets of them. I think so many different genres were blended so well together here. I do think the major plot line here is wanting these two to stay together, but the background of this historical period is so important. And like, I love when horror is used as metaphor, and this horror element of the vampires is being used to represent the threat these people have on their lives and their land. I thought that the vampires themselves were so interesting. This is a take on vampires that I have not seen before. It is more of a monster than most vampire stories go. A lot of them make them more on the human side. I was just so obsessed with these two finally being on the same page and getting together and fighting the odds to be together, and everybody staying safe, because there was a very, very real element of danger here, and I think that's what sells the pacing of this book so well. I wanted to reread it immediately. I adore this book, and now I'm debating whether I want to buy the book physically, because I did really enjoy the audiobook performances. I thought it was really good. This was one of the very few easy 5 stars I've given out this year. Then I read The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. This is a classic or modern classic, depending on who you are, but this was written in 1920 about the 1870s. So it is about the Gilded Age of New York. And our main character, Newland Archer, which, what a name, dude. He is about to be engaged to this woman, May Welland, and her cousin, who was married to a European duke, left that marriage at a time when divorce is seen as the worst thing possible. She has come back into town. Newland and this woman, Countess Olenska, were in love with each other when they were younger, but she ended up getting married before anything happened. Newland ends up going forward with announcing the engagement as soon as this woman shows up, and Newland in particular is being tortured by the expectations that are being put on him by high society New York that he has grown up in. This book reminded me a lot of Anna Karenina, specifically the Anna plot, but leaning more into humor. Like, this is still a serious book, this is more of a drama, but there were a lot of little comedic moments and satirical moments that our author is putting in, making fun of this group of people that she grew up in. I watched Materialists this year. My number 2 favorite movie I've seen this year. I cried, I loved that movie. And one of the inspirations for that film was the adaptation of The Age of Innocence, so I really wanted to read this. And I 100% see where it's coming from. It definitely is that do you go for society's expectations of you type storyline. I ended up immersive reading this book with the audiobook, and the audiobook definitely helped me get through this. Hi, I'm editing this video. I don't think I gave The Age of Innocence enough of a shot. I definitely did not prepare to review it when I was doing this. I didn't think about it enough. I think this book definitely left me with stuff to chew on. Obviously, from the title, it's talking about innocence, it's talking about class particularly, it's talking about societal expectations. I think it was really interesting to see a classic written by a woman from the perspective of a man, and honestly, if this book was written by a man, I feel like it would feel different. And I think she just has so much
poignant commentary, which is clear because of how much experience she had. Edith Wharton was born in the 1860s. This is the high society she grew up in, and she is reflecting on it as a much older woman now, reflecting on that time period. I think that this is definitely a book that modern readers can latch onto. It's got a lot of symbolism in it, and I really liked the writing style. It also feels dramatic, large feeling, low plot. And I do definitely think you can feel the tension between the characters, even if I wish I kind of had an establishment in how their relationship worked in the past. All three of our characters are interesting, but particularly the women and how they are each being portrayed as these two opposites. There's May representing the society, and because of that, she's blind to some things, but it's really that she is innocent. There are so many delusions that the society has peddled that she believes in until she is confronted with it. And then Ellen is portrayed as this character who has shirked every ounce of this New Yorker society, partially because she has lived in Europe, but also like she's already gone over the edge as far as they're concerned, so she can kind of do whatever she wants. And so she has this ounce of power that nobody else has. And like one of my favorite conversations in the book is Newland trying to convince her not to get a divorce because it would ruin her family and everything, and the whole family doesn't want her to get divorced because of how poorly it would look. She is saying something along the lines of like, isn't my freedom worth it? I think she's just a fascinating character. And I do think that this pairs well with Anna and Anna Karenina because it is the two options. Do you go for it or do you not? People suffer for it either way. The longer I have stepped away from this book, the more that I've thought about it and the more that I've pulled from it and the more that I'd like to watch the adaptation of it. I believe it has Helena Bonham Carter in it. I've heard good things. So anyway, I didn't think my review before did it really justice. So I just wanted to set the record straight. I think this is a really approachable classic that a lot of modern readers could get something out of. And obviously it is still inspiring stuff today.
Then I read The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst. I love this edition with the green sprayed edges. This is the second book in the Spell Shop Companion series. So this takes place in an empire that has forbidden anyone but specifically the empire's sorcerers from doing magic. So there are so many people that are affected by magic. There's so much magic in this world, but it is illegal for anyone to touch it who is not on this very small specific list. Our main character Tirlu was briefly mentioned in the first book. She years ago was very lonely and ended up bringing a snake plant to life, who is one of the characters that we see in the first book, and she was turned into a statue as punishment. Years after that event, but now at almost the exact same time as the spell shop takes place, she has woken up. She is no longer a statue, and she is on this island. It is all wintry, and there are these magical greenhouses with so many different rooms that all have these enchantments on them to keep the plants alive, and a lot of these plants are magical as well. It turns out there is only one other person on this island who is a man named Yarrow, and he is the last person who is supposed to be taking care of these greenhouses, but he tells her that they are slowly one by one dying off, and he can't figure out why, and she, as a librarian, has some knowledge of magic. He was told that she was going to be there to help him, and she doesn't know how to do that, and she's also afraid of getting punished again. I love The Spell Shop. It was one of my favorite books of last year, and I loved how it balanced like the fantasy with the cozy with a little bit of the romance in it. This book is more focused on the romance than the first book was, and mostly that is because for a lot of the book, he is the only other human on the island. However, I was less of a fan of the romance in this book, not based on the amount. In the first book, the main character is closed off and the other person is trying to get her to open up. And it's the reverse in this, where our main character is very open and trying to coax the other person out. And I just don't think that's the perspective that I want to be seeing from. You don't see as much of the person being actually interested. He is very kind and sweet and everything. He just does not vocalize things. Like, that is something that makes me not like a romance as much. I did like the plot of trying to figure out the magic of these greenhouses. It was a fun growth that we saw of our main character of like, okay, I have to do trial and error to be able to figure this out. I do think the magic in this world is fun. It's very witchy. You've got to use a pine cone and tie a berry to it, and then you bury it in the ground. Like, it's that kind of vibe. I also still love the little plant companions. I think they're adorable. And I just really like Sarah Beth Durst's writing style and also her ability to have the right amount of stakes to the book. I didn't like this quite as much as I liked the first book, but I am giving this a 4-star and I'm absolutely continuing on in the series. Then I read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first in a new dark fantasy series that is the first thing that he has written in years that is outside of the First Law universe, which I have not tackled yet, and I'm not going to for a long time. So I have been waiting for Joe Abercrombie to write something outside of that series for a long time, and it finally came. I listened to this on audiobook. This is an ensemble piece. It is set on a version of Earth that has all of these different creatures on it. There is historical differences. For example, there is very much a thing that is supposed to be the Catholic Church, but the savior is different, the god is different, whatever. There is a priest who is assigned to take a girl who is going to be the empress of another place to the place that she is going to be empress of. And they are going to be taking along with them these 6 mostly magical criminals who are going to kind of be their bodyguards as they go along. And this empress is a girl who used to be a thief and was just picked off to the street. And they said, oh, you're actually the long-lost empress. Our main characters include a vampire, a werewolf, a sorcerer who will remind you that he's a magician, a former pirate. I listened to this on audiobook, and at first I could not help but have my mind wander. Like every single time I would try to listen to it, I could not keep paying attention to it. And I realized it was because my normal speed was too fast for me for this book, so I did have to turn it down. I really enjoyed how this book was, you know, dark fantasy. We've got some like violence going on, and it's very action-based. It is very pacey. It is, we are going from thing to thing to thing to thing as we are on this road trip trying to get to our destination. There's constantly some sort of danger that they're in. That made this book way easier to get through, even though it's super long. This is an ensemble piece, and normally in this type of book where it's kind of like a found family type thing, you'd want to be invested in all the characters, and I did find that there were some characters that I just was not invested in compared to others. Our 2 main characters that we follow the most, I was invested in those. It was the characters who are more in the background that I just didn't care about, which is fine. Like if I have to not care about anybody, it better be those people. As the book went on, I really enjoyed how this built out stakes. I think this world is interesting. And I think honestly, this book, it felt like you could kind of pause after book 1 if you wanted to, but like I'm really excited to see where this series is going to go from here, if this like explodes into a longer series. I really liked how paranormal it felt, and there was just a lot of good humor in here. I had a good time. I'm giving this a 4-star. Then I read The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I read her most recent release, The Night We Lost Him, I believe last year, whenever it came out. I read that on ARC after I already owned this book, and I finally got around to it because it was short and I could shove it in at the end of the month. This is about our main character, Hannah. She recently married a man who has a daughter. He very unexpectedly leaves her a message that says protect her. He goes missing. He was involved in a company that is now being investigated for fraud. Our main character is trying to figure out what happened to her husband and is trying to protect the daughter from whatever happened in her husband's past, that he is now running away from this thing when there is a chance that he would not be implicated in the crime. I did not like The Night We Lost Him. However, that book has a really low average rating. This book has an okay average rating and it's very popular. It was turned into a movie, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I might like it. Let's just knock it out because I know it'll be fast. But I didn't care at all about this book. There's nothing about this book that worked for me. While this book has more of a mystery than the other book that I read from her, I don't think that this was a well-written mystery novel in the sense that, like, you know, everything came together. There were so many details that you miss and then they tie together at the end. Everything was laid out like in a row. There's no suspense, there's no red herrings. It is just told very plainly to you and lined up in a row for you to understand. I think our main character has no personality. I didn't really get invested in anything that was happening. I at least like wanted to know what happened in the dad's past, but I thought it became pretty apparent pretty quickly what sort of the deal was, and it was just a matter of figuring out the details. And those details I didn't super care about, and I didn't feel like they had a huge bearing on anything. This is one of those like more domestic mysteries that just deals with family that I don't really pick up anymore. And this is definitely more on the tame side as far as those books that I do pick up go. I just don't think this worked for me. I gave this a 3-star, and I'm thinking about putting it lower because there's nothing I really have to say that's nice about this book except it was easy to get through. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. This is the memoir that came out earlier this year from a high-up executive at Facebook. She was actually sued by, or some other legal action, by Mark Zuckerberg for her to not be able to promote her own book. Most of the marketing about this book is that Mark Zuckerberg does not want people to read this book. So Sarah Wynne Williams is sort of seeing how technology is changing, how communication is changing because of Facebook. And she has worked at the UN as a diplomat, a lot of different things like that. So she goes to Facebook and is like, hi, I want to be your diplomat. So it takes her a while to get the job there as they don't really see themselves as needing to be this international entity. But as the years goes on, she ends up getting hired and she is this high up executive there. And this is her telling multiple stories about other high up execs and the bad things that they did, the things that they were sacrificing in order to get more money and power for themselves. Saying that Facebook is a bad company on a personal level, on like a work-life balance level, sexism level, on an economic level. My camera and my mic died. Oops. There were some things that I had vaguely heard about that I did not know the details of. For example, how there was a genocide in Myanmar that was egged on by Facebook. It was interesting seeing how Facebook has changed so much on a global scale. And it was also pointing out so many different types of corruption that is within Facebook. And it also paints a portrait of some of the leaders at Facebook, specifically Mark Zuckerberg, and I believe her name is Sheryl Sandberg. The author is critiquing Facebook at all these different points, and she keeps saying that she thought that she could change Facebook from the inside, that she could be a force for good, but that she keeps getting shot down, and like a lot of the things that she wanted to do, she couldn't do, how she is having to deal with all these people who don't agree with her and everything, and are treating her poorly. And I understand being in a situation where you feel like you don't have power. And she also talks about how all of her finances were tied up with being at Facebook and how she didn't feel like financially she could leave, which sucks. I just thought that this book points a lot of fingers at other people. And even though she may be a more moral person than the other people around her, I don't know that she ever really takes a look at herself and maybe points out things that she did as much that were bad. It is more looking at other people, what they do to her personally and to the world. Our author does have a lot of problems with the things that Facebook is doing, and I think it is a good thing that this light is being shined on it because of the rise of populism that has happened because of the internet. It is tackling those things heads on, and it's talking about all of these people who have risen up to the ranks of being international powers, how we've made giants out of these people. At the end of the book, she does say that the mistake she made of staying for so long and anything she contributed is going to haunt her for the rest of her life. I don't think that that's necessarily in the narrative as much. I thought that there were a lot of good insights that were put in here, that like things that some people may not know if this is your first time looking into this sort of thing, which it was for me. I found it very interesting. And for the most part, thought the author did a good job of covering a lot of different types of corruption. That was the last book I finished in October. And if you were wondering, the book that I am currently working on is Les Miserables. I am 300 pages into this 1,400 page book. I have been mostly immersion reading the book, but sometimes just sticking with the audiobook. And I'm reading 2 different versions of it at the same time because this is the 80s version. The audiobook version is the original English translation, but luckily this translation is actually based on the old one. It is very, very, very close, and it's not that bad to do both at the same time. I am liking it so far. I am really enjoying the messages that Victor Hugo has, but oh boy is this book long. It takes 60 or 70 pages for us to even meet the main character, which is wild. At this point, Fantine has just passed away. So in order for me to finish this book before the end of the year, I need to read 550 pages of it a month. And that will definitely take a chunk out of my reading in November and December. So those were all of the books that I read in October. Let me know if you read any of these, what you thought, and what you read in October, because I'd love to know. Is there anything that I definitely need to be reading? Thank you so much for watching, and also Thank you so much for the love on the Will of the Many video. Really, I mean it. I cannot believe how many absolutely lovely comments I'm getting on it. I have not had a single, even slightly negative comment on it, and I just can't believe how many people are finding it and finding it useful because they worked really, really hard on it. And it feels like, hard work is paying off. So thank you so much for liking that video, and thank you so much for being here. So if you'd like to find me anywhere else, find me at all the links in the description. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.